Welcome to another episode of Paranormal NL, a place where people in Newfoundland and Labrador and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. Welcome back to part two with Dr. Judd Burton from Texas. Dr. Judd Burton is a multiple book author and entrepreneur. He has a PhD in history with a focus on the history of religions, early Christianity, and Greco-Roman religions. He also has a Master of Arts in Anthropology and History and a Bachelor of Arts in History. He is the owner, director, senior fellow of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology and the owner-operator of Burton Beyond. Welcome back, Dr. Burton.
Well, it's great to be back, Jen.
Yeah, part two. Ed Coffee and lots of your Kevlar coffee.
That's right. I'm sipping it as we speak.
Kevlar Joe's coffee. Okay, so shall we talk about some really weird paranormal stuff when it comes to the Institute of Biblical Anthropology? We had mentioned in part one, you've got all kinds of stuff. Mythology. Can you tell us what is preternatural morphology?
Yeah, boy, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Well, yeah, basically what it means is preternatural means that something has both physical and supernatural characteristics. And I chose morphology because morphology is a kind of whether it's linguistics or well, you're a nurse. You understand what morphology is in terms of the body. You're mapping out and looking at the way systems behave or specimens behave. Right. And I thought that was an important way to approach monsters, folkloric creatures, basically. And so that's really. I have a friend, Derek Gilbert, great podcaster, great researcher, and he took to calling this program, Monsters 101. And so that's kind of what it's become known as, and it is by far the most popular of the programs that I teach. Because I look at creatures like the vampire and the werewolf and ghouls and zombies and all kinds of chimera, kind of through the biblical lens.
Demons,
and,
mythology.
Demons, giants, all kinds of things. Yeah, we're definitely talking about myth here. But we're looking at it through the lens of the Bible, and people have responded really positively. The other programs have students in them too, but this one has really been the most popular of the ones. I think because a lot of people don't really, when they think of the Bible, they don't really think about things like vampires and werewolves and chimera and zombies, and they might think about giants and witches and things like that, but some of these other bizarre creatures that exist in world folklore they might not think about, but they're kind of hiding in plain sight. And so that's the whole point behind this, tailoring this course. And
tell us a little bit more about the Institute of Biblical Anthropology. What is it, and what do you do there?
Well, the Institute of Biblical Anthropology was originally a little project of mine that I started while I was finishing my dissertation, as if I didn't have enough to do already, right? I'm in the middle of writing a dissertation. Let's just start this little think tank group. So that's basically how that became. In all seriousness, as I was writing my dissertation, you may recall it's about a site that's related to the giants, called Peneus at the foot of Mount Hermon in northern Israel. And so I'm writing my dissertation. I keep getting all of these questions keep popping up about giants because of the traditions that were associated with that region. And I was like, okay, I can't really file this stuff away. And so I would write these little sketches, these little culture sketches on my questions, in case they were pertinent to what I was writing in my dissertation. And the product of that was the book Interview with the Giant. And I thought, these anthropological models have not really been used on the subject of the biblical giants. So there might be something here worth doing in terms of original scholarship, and that's really kind of how the Institute of Biblical Anthropology arose, with the purpose of looking at the Bible both in terms of Orthodox scholarship, but also kind of taking an X-Files meets Sunday school approach to the Bible, looking at the strange and unusual, the paranormal, the folkloric, the mythical, those kinds of things. And so that's really the purpose, the mission statement really for the Institute of Biblical Anthropology. And the purpose is to produce not only original scholarship along those lines, but also to educate people in that particular perspective on these topics. That's why I offer courses as well.
I liked one of the reviews. They said, it's amazing, like Netflix for certifications and courses.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the purposes, or at least one of the projects that's sort of simmering, is to produce more video content with filmmakers and things like that. I've done that to an extent. Like earlier this year, I was part of a documentary on the Bell Witch of Tennessee that discussed some of these related topics, because there are so many giant mounds in that part of Tennessee. We were linking those up. But yeah, that's definitely going to be part of future projects associated with the Institute. Is making that sort of streaming content available.
Now, didn't you also have a book about vampires?
I have one that that's almost ready to publish. I keep re-editing it just because I really want it to be glossy when it's out. But yes, the Van Helsing way is very close to being released, and it's not just about vampires, but it's also about some of these other creatures like the werewolves. I do write about vampires in Interview with the Giant. In fact, there's an entire chapter devoted to them. Most people might not think about vampires being associated with the giants, but if really the first scholar that I ever read that connected those two things was an English cleric, priest by the name of Montague Summers, and he was just a consummate scholar. He wrote a book called The Vampire, His Kith and Kin, where he, in the initial sort of prefatory chapter, he connects this the giant race in the pre-flood world to the emergence of the vampire, because they were bloodthirsty and cannibals, and they literally drank blood. Summers thought that this was the spiritual genesis of the vampire, and I tend to agree.
So you also have some other things on Burton Beyond I thought was very interesting for people to take a look at. There's the West Texas Institute for the Study of Paraethnology, WISP, and the West Texas Paranormal Research, WTPRS. Now, from what I understand, the mission of the WISP is to utilize ethnological and integrative methods to study the paranormal, like the biblical prophecy, biblical studies, the werewolves, cryptology, the occult, cryptozoology, the alien abductions, ufology, parapsychology, witchcrafts, cults, rogue history, rogue archaeology, demonology, possession, a lot of stuff. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, the reason so far as I know, I coined that term, paraethnology. Ethnology is the broad comparative study of culture. And so it brings in lots of different disciplines. And para, of course, like paranormal, para is supernatural, beyond, that sort of thing. And so I wanted, again, very much like the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, I wanted a kind of think tank in order to study these things. And actually that project will eventually produce a book too, of the same title, Paraethnology. I've got that's one of those books that I've got that I have to finish off. But I'm hoping to get that out next year sometime. As for some of the other departments of Burton Beyond, of which the Institute of Biblical Anthropology is one, you mentioned the WTPRS. Now, the West Texas Paranormal Research Society has a pretty long history. This goes back to, my goodness, 24 years ago. 24 years ago, a group of my friends and I, interested in these topics, we were all still undergraduates in college. We got together and basically created a think tank amongst us to study the paranormal in West Texas. It was a topic that, because all of us had gone to high school together, we'd been interested in it. We used to while away time in the library reading everything we could get our hands on about folklore and mythology and local lore. So it just seemed like a natural, organic kind of thing to do. And we still, although we do it virtually now, we definitely talk quite a bit about those topics.
Do you guys ever get in touch with MUFON, Texas? And maybe Noe Torres?
We haven't worked directly with MUFON. Now, of course, I know Noe.
Noe Torres, yes.
Noe is as I said the other day, is the Fox Mulder of South Texas. For people in the know on ufology and things of that sort in Texas, we're all familiar with Noe's work. He is a consummate researcher. Yes. And a heck of a nice guy too.
He is, and he also got another book out, I do believe, about.
That's right. His book production is positively Asimov-ian. Asimov used to churn out books left and right.
Almost as much as Dr. Burton.
Well, yeah, I would say probably more. Noe is a busy guy. But yeah, if given the opportunity, of course, I would never say no to working with Noe.
Now, given the opportunity, who would you like to work with?
Oh my gosh, this is just a 30-minute show. I don't know that I could list everybody.
You must have some on your bucket list.
I do have, and some of them I've met at conferences. One guy that I did meet at a conference, one of my intellectual heroes, Dr. Robert Shaw, who did all the great work back in the 90s on redating the Sphinx based on geology. He has done so much in terms of advancing that narrative and demonstrating it with good history, good archaeology, good geology. I got the opportunity to meet him about 10 years ago at a conference, and we talked about 15 or 20 minutes on the subject of giants, and I would welcome the opportunity to do any sort of field work with him.
Yes, and there's a lot of different places in the world that you'd like to go, I'm sure. What's some of the places like you'd like to visit and do some archaeological research and anthropology? I need some coffee, some anthropological research.
Well, Newfoundland is on my list. There's giant lore amongst the Micmac. I believe it's the Micmac tribe. Is that right?
Micmac, yes. We have a lot of different tribes.
Yeah, and there's. I would certainly welcome the opportunity, and of course, I would get to see my good friend again.
Well, there's Newfoundland, but there's also, you can't forget about Labrador. They have a huge history up there, and also the Vikings up in the Lansing Meadows.
Lansing Meadows, absolutely. But yeah, there are a ton of places that I would love to do work and go to.
Have you studied much about the Vikings?
I have. Of course, I taught, this, I taught for, I taught in academia for over 20 years, really.
Well, tell the listeners where you taught, because I don't think I went over that.
Yeah, I've taught at Amarillo College. When I lived in the Panhandle, I taught at Amarillo College. I taught at West Texas A&M University. I taught at Texas Tech when I was a teaching assistant, and I was a professor at South Texas College in McAllen for 10 years. And that's how Jen and I are friends, because we both used to live in South Texas.
Gotta love Texas.
But gotta love it. Miss that Gulf shrimp.
Yeah, I every now and again, when I get to talking with somebody from Texas, I slip in a y'all here and there.
Yes, but I hear that your Newfie accent is coming back.
I think so.
That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Oh,
but yeah, I've certainly taught about the Vikings. That's been as many world history and medieval history classes as I've taught over. So I've certainly taught about the Vikings and Lansdale Meadows. That's one of those seminal sites in North America that testifies to the Viking presence here.
Yeah, we do have a huge presence when it comes to them, and they say that America likes to say that they first found America, but I do believe Newfoundland did with the Vikings.
Oh my goodness, yeah, the Vikings were here, 400 years before Columbus was here. There's no question about it. And in fact, gosh, Jen, we're probably gonna have to do another episode on that. There's plenty of evidence that suggests that there were people from the old world even before the Vikings being in North America.
And how about some of the things that you've studied about other people coming across here? Have you studied anything about the Masonics and any things that they brought over here in Eastern North America?
No, not in particular. Well, I shouldn't say comprehensively. I haven't. But one of the things that's really interesting about the linguistic evidence of old world peoples being in the New World, particularly ancient peoples, is the fact that we have records of when the first missionaries began to missionize some of the tribes in the eastern woodlands, like the Choctaw and the Chickasaw and the Cherokee. In particular, the Cherokee could understand to a degree the Hebrew that the missionaries had been trained in.
Oh.
So what that speaks to is that there were people from West Asia, ancient West Asia, in the Americas long before even Europeans began to make their way to the Americas. Not to mention the fact that on the other side of the continent, on the West Coast, we have evidence of the Chinese Admiral Zheng He making it to California probably 60 or 70 years before Columbus lands in the Bahamas. There were plenty of people that beat Columbus to the punch, in some cases by a long margin, over 2,000 years.
So there's people running around all over the world. Let's get spooky again in biblical demonology.
Okay, well, again, that's probably the second most popular program that I teach. But of course, this is such an interesting subject. Even if people aren't really students of the Bible, there are courses that I have in here that are largely historical in nature and talk about the mythology of the ancient Near East, because you can't really talk about biblical demonology without looking at it in the larger context of, let's say, ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia and ancient Anatolia, because all of these particular cultures had a direct influence on the Levant, Israel and ancient Phoenicia. And so looking at the kinds of, if you will, the species of demons and fallen entities that make up the dark realm, the unseen realm in the Bible, a lot of that is shared imagery with some of these creatures in ancient Near Eastern mythology, such as the Rephaim, one of these tribes of giants. That word is derived from the Akkadian Sumerian Rabbah, which means ruler, and a specific kind of ruler, the kings, the god kings that were sent to the abyss in Mesopotamian mythology. And so that's why the Rephaim are often called the wraiths or the dead ones, is because they're the same thing, and they're also mentioned in the Phoenician Ugaritic stuff. And so it is a biblical and religious study, but it's also a historical study, one to which the aforementioned Montague Summers spent much of his time, much of his scholarly energy on.
Some of these studies that you have also are with, I want to say, I think it's WISP or WTPRS, ghosts or hauntings, the occult, witchcrafts, cults. Talk to us about that weirdness.
Well, again, most of what the WTPRS has done over the years has been on a project-by-project basis.
Have you ever had somebody who you had to help with that?
Yes, we've done a number of investigations of hauntings. One was the old Windsor Hotel in Abilene, Texas, that we did. That was one of the more interesting ones because it's a historic building. It's one of the older ones in Abilene, Texas. Probably one of the tallest buildings in Abilene. But there were all kinds of like poltergeist activity that had been reported in the building. And so we did a historical and field investigation for them back in, this is really dating me, back in 2004, so almost 20 years ago. But that was I thought one of the more interesting investigations that we did, although we've done a number of them since. But the other department in Burton Beyond is USAV, and that's largely devoted to archaeological projects that are stateside. So, for instance, for the last 20 some odd years, I've been the archaeological liaison for the Brandywine Crucible, which is a family history organization here in Texas, and we've been researching a site in Central Texas that turned out to be a lost Spanish mission that was built in the mid-1700s. So that's strictly a field archaeological work that we do.
That was interesting. Yeah, we're going to have maybe a third episode in the future about more of your spooky stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we're coming up again on coffee hour. Tell our listeners again, Dr. Burton, where to find your work.
Hey, you guys can check the work out at burtonbeyond.net. That's also where the Institute of Biblical Anthropology is at for the time being. That's burtonbeyond.net/IBA. I also offer the bookstores there, so there's tons of books. I have coffee. There's more merch coming, T-shirts, mugs, all kinds of ways. And the people who have responded, Jennifer, they want a Dr. Judd Burton broadcast, so I'm going to have to add that into the mix at some point. But people can follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on X, Twitter. Got a YouTube channel that I need to start making more videos for. If only I had extra hours in the day. But there's all kinds of things that people can check out at burtonbeyond.net and the various websites. There are books that are on tap that are ready to be published. One of them is on the Serpent Mound of Israel, which is in the Golan Heights. The other one is a book on Göbekli Tepe and the Bible. Göbekli Tepe has been making waves for the last 10 or 15 years or so. Lots of new stuff coming out of Turkey. So, yeah, there's a lot going on at Bird and Beyond that people can check out. And, thank you again for everybody that's responded, taking coursework and buying the books. And the merriest of Christmases to you this Christmas season.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Dr. Burton. And, our listeners really love to listen to your work. And folks, if you want to get on your Paranormal NL episode here on Paranormal NL, you can have a podcast. Head on over to Paranormal NL on Facebook and send me a message through Messenger. I'll get back to you and we can set something up. Also, on Spotify, don't forget to hit the bell and follow along, and you will get updates on when we have new podcasts coming out. In fact, we have another podcast tonight following Dr. Burton. We're going to be talking to a lady who has a haunted house here in Newfoundland in town. Be sure to listen to that one. And also stay tuned in the future for Mary Escott, who wrote a book about the Masonic temple downtown. They found a secret tunnel under the Masonic temple. Stay tuned and stay spooky, everybody. Thanks for listening to Paranormal NL with Dr. Judd Burton. I'm your host, Jennifer Vallis.